Hey everyone, today, let's take a moment to tune out the noise, set our phones aside, and just be here fully present with me. To hear a story, my story woven together with reflections and insights drawn from the work of Carl Jung. I truly believe the time you're giving to watch this means something, and I promise it'll be worth it. Thank you, from the bottom of my heart. Now, sit back, relax, and enjoy. So before we really get started, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you really like what I do here. And if you're comfortable, drop a comment and let me know your city and local time right now. Now, maybe turn on some fan noise or some soft music background noise. Put your phone aside, pour yourself a warm cup of tea, and in this quiet moment, join me on a journey of discovery. There was a time when I was afraid of myself. That sounds strange, right? But it's the only way I can explain it. I was afraid of what I would find if I sat too long in silence. Afraid of the memories that pressed up against my ribs when the world grew quiet. There were days I kept myself busy, just so I wouldn't hear the whispers. Days I smiled when my throat ached to scream. Nights I couldn't sleep. Not because I wasn't tired, but because my soul wasn't at peace. I used to think healing was about polishing the surface, lighting a few scented candles, journaling with pretty pens, making to-do lists titled self-care. But then came the reckoning, the shadow, as Jung would call it. The parts of myself I had buried so deep. I forgot I'd ever owned them. Jealousy, rage, shame. The kind of emotions you're taught to sanitize or swallow. Especially as a woman, we're told to be sweet, to be nice, to be palatable. But buried things, they don't die. They ferment, they wait. They grow sharp teeth and hide in our dreams. Our breakdowns, our resentments that simmer under tight smiles. There's this memory I return to often. I'm 29, standing in front of the mirror brushing my hair, and suddenly I see a stranger. Not because I looked different, but because I felt nothing. Just numb. That's when I knew something had to change. That was the beginning of the descent. I didn't have some lightning bolt revelation, no ayahuasca trip in the jungle, just a slow burn of inner discomfort that finally became louder than the noise outside me. I started therapy. I started writing the truth instead of the version I thought was acceptable. I started meeting the younger version of me, the one who'd been quieted too many times, and I listened. It's a strange thing, to face yourself, to look in the mirror and not flinch when it shows you the unedited version, to sit with the ache, not fix it, to ask your rage what it's trying to protect. You begin to realize that these emotions aren't your enemies. They're messengers, carriers of truth. An old-school bit of wisdom says, "What you resist persists." Jung would have nodded at that, because integration, not suppression, is the goal. And I'll be honest, it's messy work. There were days I felt like a crime scene, trying to map out the origin of every trigger. And there were days I laughed at myself mid-sob because, well, if you can't cry and laugh at the same time during healing, are you even doing it right? Oh, and here's an odd fact that helped me oddly. Cats purr at a frequency that promotes healing in their own bones. Yeah, nature literally made them vibrate themselves back to wholeness. I wondered, what if we had that too? What if facing our shadow wasn't a breakdown, but a vibration? A calling back of parts long ignored. I think of Maya, a woman I met in a writing circle once. She was 61 when she finally let herself write letters to her mother. Letters full of hurt and honesty and things she could never say aloud. She said to me, "I thought forgiveness meant pretending it didn't hurt, but I was wrong. Forgiveness means letting it hurt long enough to release it." Maya wasn't perfect, neither am I. But the day she read one of those letters out loud, her voice didn't shake. It rang like a bell, clear, present, rooted. That's the gift of reconciling with the shadow. You don't become flawless. You become real. And in a world built on filters and facades, that realness, that's the revolution. A woman or anyone really who has done this work doesn't need to raise her voice. Her presence speaks. Her silence holds. Her scars shine. I didn't expect to find beauty in the darkness, but I did. And slowly, it began to change me not into someone new, but into someone whole, You might not believe me, and that's okay. But don't stop here. Keep watching. Because maybe, just maybe, what you've been searching for is still to come. There's a silence I carry with me now, not the uncomfortable kind that used to stretch awkwardly between small talk, but a steady, grounded stillness. You know, the kind you feel when you walk into a room where someone's been praying, or grieving, or just really listening. That's what it feels like inside me these days. And let me tell you, it didn't come from a yoga class. It came from realizing I was addicted to noise. Not just external noise, like podcasts and pings and playlists. I mean emotional noise, drama, gossip, the rush of opinions. There was a time I believed passion meant intensity. That to be alive was to be loud, reactive, even explosive. Maybe you know the type. Texts in all caps. Fights that turn poetic in their rage. Friendships built on late-night oversharing and mutual enemies. It felt real until it didn't. There's this memory I hold close, a Saturday afternoon, rain tapping the windows, and me alone with a cup of tea, reading "Nu TV," no texts, just me. And I remember thinking, wow, so this is what peace tastes like. It wasn't dramatic. It was divine. I used to confuse chaos with chemistry. I thought people who challenged me, who ignited conflict, were keeping me awake. Turns out, they were just mirroring the noise I hadn't yet faced in myself. Carl Jung once said, "Everything that irritates us about others can lead us to an understanding of ourselves." Oh, Carl, drag me. Why don't you? But seriously, once I started to declutter my internal landscape, I became allergic to certain things. Gossip started to sound like sandpaper. Arguments felt like migraines with good lighting. Theatrics lost their thrill, and I started craving quiet. Not boredom, not avoidance, but actual inner quiet. That's when I knew something had shifted. I started noticing how many people mistake loudness for power. It's everywhere, on stages, on social media, in meetings where the person who talks the most is often assumed to be the smartest. But power, real power, doesn't shout. It doesn't even need to announce itself. It simply is. It's like the ocean. It doesn't scream its depth. You feel it. There's this woman I once worked with, Clara. She wasn't flashy. She didn't decorate her words with jargon. But when she entered a room, the air changed. You leaned in when she spoke. She could say, "Let's pause," and the entire boardroom would still. That's the energy I wanted. And I realized she wasn't born with it. She built it. Through restraint, through self-awareness, through the slow withdrawal from drama as identity. And I'll admit, leaving the theater of chaos isn't easy. There's a kind of camaraderie in the mess. Group chats filled with venting. DMs overflowing with outrage. It's seductive, but it's also a sugar rush. You crash. Hard. Eventually, I stopped performing. I stopped jumping into conversations just to feel included. I stopped responding just to prove I wasn't afraid of confrontation. Not because I was passive, but because I was finally discerning. You want to know what's radical? Pausing in the heat of a fight and asking yourself, what's really being threatened right now? Is it your ego? Your childhood wound? Your fear of being left? I did that once, mid-argument with a close friend. I stopped, breathed, and said, "Wait, I'm not even mad at you. I'm terrified you'll leave me like everyone else did." And just like that, the fight deflated. We didn't solve everything, but we reached something truer, and that was enough. Here's your off-topic fact of the day. Lobsters, when they outgrow their shells, hide under rocks while they soften and grow a new one. It's one of the most vulnerable times in their lives, and yet, they still do it. Sometimes, silence is our rock. We live in a world that prizes immediacy, hot takes, snappy comebacks. But maturity is the art of slowing down, of choosing your responses, of knowing that being provoked doesn't mean you have to react. I've learned to love the pause, to let others rush to speak while I sit with my truth. It's not about being the last to talk. It's about being the one who doesn't need to dominate in order to be powerful. And you know what's wild? People start listening more when you speak less. Not because you're mysterious, but because your words carry weight. They're not thrown like darts. They're placed like stones in a garden path. Walkable, steady, leading somewhere meaningful. So if you find yourself exhausted by noise, emotional, digital, conversational, Maybe it's not that you're too sensitive. Maybe you're just evolving. Maybe stillness is your next chapter. It took me years to realize that the word boundary wasn't supposed to be a threat. I used to flinch at it. Boundaries felt like fences, like rejections dressed in nice language. Saying no felt like failure, like letting someone down, or worse, being difficult. And for a long time, I lived like that, softening my voice, smiling when I didn't mean it, stretching myself into shapes that felt like betrayal. But betrayal wears 1,000 outfits. Sometimes it shows up as a polite sure. Sometimes it shows up as a second date you didn't really want, or a dinner invite you accepted, even though your soul whispered, "Not tonight." And every time I said yes when I meant no, I chipped away at myself, just a little. But over time, those chips became fractures. Here's the thing they don't tell you. Boundaries aren't walls. They're doors, and you get to choose what passes through. Boundaries aren't selfish. They're sacred. They say, "This is how I stay whole. This is how I stay kind." Carl Jung once wrote about the individuation process, how each of us must become who we truly are, distinct from the expectations we've inherited. That process, it begins with a line in the sand. I remember the first time I said no without an apology. My voice didn't shake. I didn't over-explain. I simply said, "That doesn't work for me." It felt like skydiving, terrifying, freeing, and also final. Not because the friendship ended, but because I stopped negotiating my needs. We're taught early that saying no is rude, that we must earn love through sacrifice. But here's what I've learned. A forced yes always costs more than an honest no. And respect built on self-erasure isn't respect at all. It's theater. Exhausting. Unpaid theater. There's a woman I knew, Sandy, a kind soul, a giver. She was always there for everyone. Always on, always smiling. Until one day, she burned out so hard, she ghosted her own birthday party. She told me later, "I was so tired of hosting a version of myself that wasn't real." That line stuck with me. Hosting a version of myself. I'd done it too at work, in relationships, even in the mirror. Now, I don't host, I live. I show up as me, not as the curated hostess of everyone's comfort. Boundaries changed everything, not just in what I allowed, but in what I radiated. Because when you respect yourself, people feel it before you say a word. They sense it in your stillness, in the way you pause before agreeing, in how you hold eye contact without flinching or faking it. There's this academic debate I stumbled across. Some psychologists argue that rigid boundaries are just walls of trauma, while others say porous boundaries are signs of codependency. Honestly, both are true when we don't know ourselves. But a mature boundary, that's not trauma or weakness. That's clarity. That's truth in motion. And sometimes, the most powerful boundary is silence. Not ghosting, just choosing not to explain yourself to people committed to misunderstanding you. Odd fact for this section, octopuses can taste with their skin. Yeah, their whole body can detect chemical signals. Imagine if we could feel dishonesty on our skin like that. Actually, maybe we can. Ever gotten goosebumps when someone lied to your face? My body knows before my brain catches up. That's why I trust it now. If my gut tightens, if my breath shortens, if my smile feels like a costume, I pause. I reevaluate. Because my body keeps the score, and she's done being polite at her own expense. You want to see a woman reclaim her power? Watch her stop over-explaining. Watch her walk away without slamming the door, without a dramatic exit, just a soft, "This isn't mine to carry anymore." You might call her distant, cold, unavailable. But here's the truth. She's just finally available to herself. And yes, it can get lonely. Sometimes people don't like the new version of you, the one who has standards, the one who doesn't bend just to be liked. But what you lose in quantity, you gain in depth. The people who stay, they're your people. The ones who meet you at eye level, soul first. So if you're struggling to draw the line, start small. Say no to the thing that drains you. Cancel the plan you dread. Speak the truth, even if your voice trembles. Each time you do, you reclaim a piece of yourself. And piece by piece, you come home. There comes a moment quiet, unspectacular, when you look in the mirror and realize you're no longer at war with your own body. That moment doesn't arrive with fanfare. It sneaks in slowly. like warm light after a storm. You're brushing your hair or slipping into a dress that fits your soul more than your waistline, and suddenly it hits you. I'm not here to conquer this body. I'm here to live in it. It took me decades to get there. When I was younger, I lived in a constant state of apology. Apologizing for my thighs, for my hunger, for not fitting into jeans designed for mannequins and movie scenes. I learned to call it discipline, but really, it was shame and designer packaging. I treated my body like a disobedient pet, always needing correction. Eat less, move more, suck it in, smile through it. But over time, something shifted. Maybe it was the fatigue, emotional, physical, spiritual. Maybe it was watching older women move through the world with the grace of trees rooted, unapologetic, blooming on their own terms. Or maybe, like Jung says, I finally began the individuation process, this soul-led movement away from the collective scripts and into my own truth. And my truth was this: I was tired of fighting myself. I didn't want another morning spent body checking in the mirror. I didn't want to measure my worth in calories or compliments. I wanted to arrive fully in this skin, in this season, in this breath. One night, I looked down at the stretch marks on my stomach and thought, these are lightning bolts, evidence that I grew, that I survived, and something softened in me. I stopped skipping meals and started cooking slowly. I stopped obsessing over inches and started measuring my days in laughter, in peace, in energy. I traded before and after pictures for present moment joy. You know what's wild? Your body is constantly trying to keep you alive. Heartbeat after heartbeat, breath after breath, and yet, we criticize it like it owes us something. But it owes us nothing. We owe it reverence. Here's a little odd fact. The human heart generates enough pressure to squirt blood 30 feet. 30 feet. That's a lot of love power. And yet, we think we're fragile. We think beauty is in the symmetry of cheekbones, not in the resilience of a heart that keeps showing up, even after betrayal. I began to understand, this body is my archive. It holds every moment I've lived, the ache in my knees from childhood ballet, the scar on my wrist from learning to ride a bike, the laugh lines carved by grief and joy alike. This isn't decay, it's documentation. And as I healed, my habits changed not out of punishment, but out of partnership. Movement became meditation. Walks at dawn, yoga without mirrors, dancing barefoot in my kitchen to Sade at 11 p.m. Food became ritual. Soup simmered on Sundays, fresh fruit eaten slowly, like prayer. Rest became a revolution. Naps, not guilt trips. And for the first time, I wore clothes not to conceal or perform, but to celebrate the shape I'd become. I didn't need to snap back. I needed to settle in. There's an academic term I once read, embodiment, the full awareness and ownership of one's physical experience. It's often talked about in philosophy, but I found it in simpler moments, like sitting in the sun and feeling warmth on my shoulders without flinching. That's embodiment. That's homecoming. I remember seeing a woman in her 50s, silver hair twisted up, dancing at a wedding barefoot. She wasn't trying to be sexy. She wasn't trying to be young. She was just alive. And that aliveness, that's what draws people in. Not tight skin or perfect posture, but joy that spills from the bones. You want to know the moment I knew I had arrived. It wasn't when someone called me beautiful. It was when I caught my own reflection, mid-laugh, mid-tears, no makeup, and whispered, "You're okay. You're real. I see you." That's what maturity looks like to me now. Not a number, not a dress size, but the ability to be seen by yourself and not turn away. So to anyone who's still fighting their reflection, you don't have to earn your body. You already live there. Now decorate it, honor it, listen to it. It's the only home that travels with your soul. There was a chapter in my life where everything I did had one unspoken goal: be liked. Every choice filtered through that lens. Should I speak up? Should I post that? Should I wear this? Not because it felt right, but because it felt safe. And safety, back then, meant acceptance. So I performed. I was fluent in small talk. I mastered the art of being agreeable. I took up just enough space to feel noticed, but not so much as to be too much. And it worked. Kind of. I was liked, but I wasn't known, and certainly not by myself. It's funny, Carl Jung once said, "The privilege of a lifetime is to become who you truly are." But to do that, you have to stop performing. You have to stop measuring your value in applause. And that is terrifying. Because there's a high that comes with being chosen. Chosen for the job, the project, the relationship. We tell ourselves, this means I matter. But it doesn't. It just means you're good at being what they needed in that moment. There's a deeper kind of fulfillment. The kind that doesn't spike, but hums. That's what I wanted. What I craved. And eventually, thankfully, I stopped chasing the spotlight and started following the compass inside me. That's when life began to rearrange. I started saying no to opportunities that looked good on paper, but felt hollow. I stopped trying to grow my network and started nourishing my community. I wrote what I wanted, not what the algorithm liked. I stopped trying to go viral and started trying to go honest. There's a quiet magic that enters your life when you no longer need your life to be loud. When your creativity becomes sacred again, not content. You know what's wild? Bison will face into a storm instead of running from it. Unlike most animals, they instinctively walk through it because it gets them to the other side faster. That's what following your soul feels like. You face the storm. You don't outrun it with busyness or validation. You walk into it, trembling, but true, and slowly, things shift. You begin to write with depth, not for claps. You speak not to impress, but to connect. You move not to be seen, but to express something ancient inside you. There's an academic concept called intrinsic motivation, doing something for its own sake, not for reward or recognition. I think that's the soul's language. It whispers, do this, not because it will be successful, but because it will be you. And that changes everything. I knew a woman who left a 6-figure job to start a grief support group in her community. No press releases, no brand partnerships, just a circle of chairs, a pot of tea, and a sign on the church door that said, "Come as you are, cry if you need to." And she told me once, for the first time in my life, I'm not performing healing, I'm living it. That stayed with me. Because when we lead from soul, things align, not instantly, not always profitably, but truthfully. We stop trying to force outcomes. We start trusting process. And life begins to feel less like a race and more like a rhythm. People may not understand you. They might even fall away. But the ones who stay, they'll see you. Not your mask, not your metrics. You. So if you're tired of playing roles, I get it. It's exhausting to keep adjusting your volume just to stay welcome in rooms you've outgrown. But you don't have to do that anymore. You can leave. You can step out of the performance and into your presence. You don't need a rebrand. You need a return to yourself. Wholeness is a quiet kind of power. It doesn't sparkle like youth or shout like ambition. It doesn't ask to be seen. It becomes seen inevitably because it can't help but glow from within. I didn't always know that. I used to think power came from effort, from control, from achievement and polish and being 5 steps ahead. But now, I see it differently. Power is not about controlling how you're perceived. It's about no longer needing to be perceived a certain way at all. It's wild. The kind of woman I used to think I needed to be. Smooth, sharp, strategic, always on. But now, the women who move me are softer, quieter, rooted in something deeper than strategy. They speak less, but when they do, it lands. There's one in particular I'll never forget. She was in her 70s, wore linen everything, smelled like cedar and old books. We were at this little gathering, and someone asked her how she manages to be so magnetic. She smiled and said, "I stopped trying to be magnetic." She sipped her tea and added, "I just became someone I enjoy being alone with." And the whole room went still. That's the kind of woman I aspire to be now. Not adored, but anchored. It's not perfection that draws people in. It's presence. Not presence like charisma. Presence like here-ness. The kind that says, I'm not waiting to be more lovable. I already am. I've come to understand that what makes someone irresistible isn't their wardrobe or wit. It's their wholeness. Their integration, the way they own every piece of their story. Even the parts that once made them shrink. Carl Jung said, "One does not become enlightened by imagining figures of light, but by making the darkness conscious." That's it. That's the whole game. It's not about transcending your flaws. It's about befriending them. It's about saying, "This too is me," and not whispering it, but saying it loud enough that your shame has no place to hide. Odd fact for today: trees can communicate with each other through underground fungal networks. They share nutrients. They warn each other of threats. They support each other quietly, invisibly. And I like to think we're like that too. When we live from our wholeness, we connect not by performance, but by presence. I remember a man once telling me, "There's just something about you lately. It's like peace." And that, to me, was the highest compliment. Not, "You look good," not, "You're impressive," but "You feel like peace." I didn't get there by winning. I got there by letting go of who I thought I had to be, of who I was trying to be for approval, of the fantasy life I was building, instead of the honest one that was waiting patiently to be lived. These days, my power doesn't look like ambition. It looks like alignment. I don't chase, I listen. I don't scheme, I surrender. I don't need a 5-year plan. I need 5 deep breaths. I know what's mine. And more importantly, I know what isn't. That's what wholeness does. It clears the clutter. You stop reaching. You start remembering. You remember that your worth was never in question. That you're not here to perform. You're here to be. To be a safe place for yourself first. To become someone your younger self would feel safe with. To be someone your future self would look back on and smile. You're not too much. You're not too late. You're not behind. You're becoming. And if it feels lonely sometimes, that's okay. Becoming is a sacred act. And sacred acts often happen in solitude. So, if today feels tender, if you're in the middle of your return, pause. Place your hand on your heart and whisper, "I'm still here." And that's enough. Let's slow everything down now, just for a moment. Let your shoulders soften. Let the pace of your thoughts untangle. We've walked through shadow and silence, through the body and the soul, through boundaries and bare truths. This journey, this remembering isn't linear. It's a spiral, a quiet return. You're not meant to perform your way into love. You're meant to rest into your presence. Because wholeness is not something you find out there. It's something you gather, gently, piece by piece, from within. There is a kind of maturity that isn't loud. It's not branded, not optimized, but it changes the temperature of a room. It comforts without fixing. It radiates without trying. And that's what we long for. Not polished surfaces, but depth. Not performance, but truth. So if you feel like you're unbecoming everything you thought you had to be good, let it fall. Let it unravel. That's not failure. That's freedom. You are not here to be liked by everyone. You are here to become yourself, fully. And when you do, something ancient awakens in others. They see your authenticity and remember their own. That's the quiet revolution. That's what it means to be magnetic. Not because of how you look, but because of how you live. Thank you for taking the time to listen. I hope today you find a quiet corner to continue that silent conversation with yourself. And don't forget to subscribe. There are many more videos to come about dreams, the shadow, and the hidden corners of the soul waiting for you ahead.